Hi, it's Dennis Daly. There's something neat about going back into your archives and finding a piece of tape you thought was lost. In the summer of 1975, I was hosting, as a rather much younger man, Indiana's first public radio talk show. It was called Older Americans, The Issue is Aging. I produced it from my hometown of Washington, Indiana. And on one show, I had Judge Curtis Shake, the oldest practicing attorney in Indiana, one of the founders of Sigma Pi fraternity, a former president of Indiana University, a member of the Indiana Supreme Court, but more than that, one of the judges at the Nuremberg War Crimes trials in 1947 and 1948. I first asked Judge Shake if he thought, as a rural Indiana country lawyer, he would accomplish all of that in one lifetime.
No idea that anything like that would ever happen to me. I was just a country boy that got it in my head I wanted to be a lawyer. And I made the grade. I got admitted to the bar, got through law school, and from then on, it just happened.
What kind of assignments did you have as a fledgling lawyer? What kind of cases did you take on? When did you graduate from law school?
1910.
Which was right before World War I.
Yeah,
right? Yes. Did you have to serve an apprenticeship for quite a while? Or did you set up your own
I got
office?
out of law school and rented an office for $4 a month and bought some second-hand furniture and went to it.
$4 a month?
Yeah. At Bicknell. I started practicing law at Bicknell. Mm-hmm. And I was there about 4 or 5 years. Bicknell was a mining town and on the boom and growing very rapidly, and I stayed there. So I thought I could take some clients with me back to Vincennes, and then I moved down to the county seat.
That would have been then right after World War I.
I know, it was just about the time. I was at Bicknell from 1911 until 1916. I moved to Vincennes in 1960.
Has the kind of cases that, I guess this is a very loaded question, certainly a young man who's preparing himself to be a lawyer now, the complexity of court cases, I would presume, has tremendously accelerated since the time you were in school.
That's true. Of course, as a young lawyer, I had everything imaginable. Any kind of a case that came along, I took. And there's more specialization now in this modern age. Lawyers get into a rut of some particular field, corporation law, criminal lawyer, probate, whatever.
Somewhat along the line that most doctors are. They specialize.
That's right. That was less so back when I started.
Well, I know you were very active in law and then served for a time with the Indiana Supreme Court, did you not?
Yeah, I was appointed to the court for 1 year and then elected for a full term, which is 6 years, and I served 7 years on the Indiana Supreme Court.
The thing that I think excites most people when they read of your life is that you served as part of the Nuremberg War Crimes Tribunal following World War II.
About 2 years in Nuremberg on the war crime cases, yeah.
The movie Judgment at Nuremberg with Spencer Tracy, was that fairly accurate when you see that?
It was fictionized a lot. The background and the scenery was perfect. But, of course, to make a movie, they had to get some women in it and all like that. You know.
Have to put a little bit of excitement.
That's right.
Were you apprehensive about going over there? I would presume the feelings of the average citizen following the war were still at a very fever pitch, particularly in that area. I
was concerned about it, but it was a mistake on my part. There's nothing happened at all. It was a perfectly peaceful and quiet place when I got there. Mm-hmm. And I got there in 47. The war was just over.
Right. What actual part of the trials were you active in?
Well, there were 12 trials, 12 separate cases. And each was tried by one tribunal, and the tribunal was made up of 3 judges. And the case I was on was what's commonly called the Farbin case, I.G. Farbin case. I thought ignorantly when I went over there and heard that would be the case. Farbin was probably the name of a corporation that got its name from the man that founded it. Of course, Farbin is the German word for dye stuff. And the case that I tried consisted of the defendants. The defendants consisted of the executives of the I.G. Farbin syndicate, or chemical industry. Mm-hmm. largest industry in Germany at the time.
Which would be comparable to our DuPont or
Yes, that's right.
corporation.
That's right.
What kind of a feeling did you go away with?
Now, I've been at Dachau, at Buchenwald, at Auschwitz. Those were notorious concentration camps where they gassed and burned some 6 or 7 million people. Mm-hmm. And I would say that you can go see them. But until you have to, you just have no conception of what it was. It just overpowers you as to the horror of those things. When you see they were built for that purpose, built to exterminate human beings.
It's just I cannot even fathom in my own mind the thought of exterminating 1,000 people, let alone millions.
And they kept records on them day by day. They kept their own records, which we had in the trials, or they had in their trials, that not mine, and tell by day just how many went through.
It's frightening to even think about it now. I hope the world never sees anything like that happen again.
I certainly do too, that's why I think the trials were justified. Perhaps they're a first and feeble step in the direction of some sort of a system of international law that can prevent those things.
Were the judges only United States judges trying?
Yes, the tribunals I did, of course, the International Military Tribunal, which set the pace for the things, was over first before we went. Mm-hmm. And that was a 4-power court.
So there had been at least some precedent set for it, and the systems had been set up.
That's right.
Was it a cumbersome thing working with the bi-language problem, wearing headphones and that type of thing?
After you got accustomed to wearing about 5 or 6 pounds of steel on your head, you just became unconscious of the fact. We have 4 or 5 languages going at once. I heard nothing but English. I said nothing but my own language. Mm-hmm. But a German got it in German. A Frenchman there, he got it in French.
It must have been very reminiscent of what we see at the United Nations.
Well, the fact of it is, the staff, the mechanical staff, the translators, were from the United Nations. Mm-hmm. Same staff.
Well, let's look a little bit ahead to this bicentennial year that we're in. I know you're very active in trying to preserve some of the historical sites in southwestern Indiana. I can't help sitting here with you and thinking of the background in law, how important law has been to the fact that this country has lasted 200 years.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. 200 years is a very short time in the history of the world. And yet, look what we've done in 200 years, from the Declaration of Independence until next year.
And very few countries have lasted that long with as stable a type of government.
That's right. I think it's a great opportunity of education to people to understand how this country came into existence, how this nation came into existence, and its basic and fundamental principles. Very important.
Do you fear for the future of this country?
Oh, I think we're confronted all the time with dangers, but I'm hopeful. I think we'll work out of it. I think we're sound, and our principles of government, our recognition of the rights of the individual, I think they're basic, and I'm not apprehensive that they will lose them. I think we have problems constantly. That's the price of self-government.
You spend a lot of time with young people. I know that you're active with Sigma Pi fraternity. You were one of the early members of what is a national fraternity with its headquarters here in Indiana at Vincennes. Do you enjoy being around young people?
Yes, very much, very much.
Do you see them as being much different than, let's say, the 18 or 20-year-olds were when you were growing up?
Oh, basically, no. Superficially, yes. They let their hair grow long now. And one time, I can remember when everybody had a cruise cut. When I was in college, the closer you get your hair cut, the more you were in style, and now the longer you let it go. Those things are passing. I don't think they're significant at all.
Do the young people talk to you with their worries? Do they fear that the world has become so complicated that it's difficult for one person to think that he or she has any control over his own destiny?
Well, I know there is an apprehension of that kind, and it isn't not only of young people, but of older have the same fears, I think. But I'm optimistic about it. I think, as the English have an expression, we'll muddle through it, I think.
When you were a justice in the Indiana Supreme Court, was it... were you running on a political party label at that time?
Well, I was first appointed by the governor to fill a vacancy. But when I was a candidate, year following, I was party nominee, sure.
Did you have any aspirations to run for political office? Do you see politics as a clean kind of thing, or?
No, I don't think it's clean. I think it's wholesome. I think it can necessary. And I've had political ambitions. I was in the state legislature before I was on the Supreme Court and the state Senate. I was a candidate for Attorney General, nominated for Attorney General in 1928, and had my fling at that, and I enjoyed it.
Something I wonder about, you entered college prior to World War I, and I think you made the statement one time that Vincennes University, which is only a 2-year school, and by comparison to the other schools is rather small, is larger now than Indiana University was when you were in it.
Yeah, that's right.
There.
That's true.
What was the college system like? Was it the kind of picture we see where everybody treated the professors with a great amount of respect, and it was a formidable type of thing?
Well, I think it was more or less that way. I don't think they had the freedom of expression that you have on the average campus now. Back in that period of time, I think there was more formality to it. But basically, I don't think it was any different.
I know that one of the gentlemen at Vincennes University several years ago was from Miami University of Ohio, and when I was at Miami University about 10 years ago at a conference, they were explaining that when it was run by one of the major Protestant churches, I forget which, the students had to get up and go to chapel every morning. And I just wonder if the college would try that today, what would happen?
Oh, well, that was even past in my day. We had no compulsory chapel.
Right.
But that was true of the small and denominational colleges, and for pretty generally at one time. That's all passed.
But it was never the case at the what we would call public or open colleges.
No.
In your life in law in southern Indiana, are there any court cases, and again, I'm not talking about your experiences at Nuremberg, but here in the United States, that stand out in your memory that you still maybe think about or wonder whatever happened to?
Oh, not as they apply to individuals, which have been landmark decisions, come along every so often, and not infrequently. But I don't know of any. As far as the individuals who were involved in is concerned, I don't remember any. After all, a judge doesn't look at them from the standpoint of the individual involved. He looks at it from the standpoint of the case and the law.
I would presume then there would be a great deal of soul searching that goes on, particularly when there is no jury or a judge is the one to make the decision. Well, what do you do when you go back through the law books and you just don't find a precedent in that area?
Well, you find a precedent for almost anything. In the first place, the Supreme Court of Indiana and the Court of Appeals are review courts. The case has been tried before. It's had its jury, if there was a jury, and the case has been decided by a jury or by the trial court. The trial judge has said that in my judgment there's no error in this case. I will rule in motion for new trial. Then the unsuccessful party has appealed. So you don't have a case of just first impression before a Supreme Court. You don't have it in that sense.
And there's a great deal of documentation that you have in front of you from the original case.
You have a transcript of everything that's happened in the case. All the witnesses, testimony, you have it for you.
We're talking about the age of specialization, and this seems to be the hot issue now, this idea of doctors' malpractice insurance and this kind of thing. I just wonder, that seems to be such an unreasonable thing. Was it just because people have gotten happy when it came to their doctors? They saw other people getting enormous settlements, and
I don't know. I don't know what.
It just seems to have gotten so out of hand the past 4 or 5 years.
Well, after all, you're applying no new law. It's the law has been the law against malpractice for time immemorial, and the decisions are by juries in most cases, and juries are a cross section of the public now, as they've always been. So I don't know what the reason for it is.
It'll probably be a long time straightening it out. I know a lot of states have even had to set up special committees to try to get insurance for doctors because no one will insure them anymore.
That's right. That's right.
That would be an awful predicament to be in.
Yeah.
Let's look again at the bicentennial observance coming up. I was talking to Tom Christine of the Historical Collection at the Vincennes University Library on the 4th of July, and we were speculating as to how excited the average citizen is going to be. Right now, certainly historical societies and those of us that care about history are excited about 1976. I just wonder why maybe the average citizen isn't on the bandwagon yet. Is it because it's still a year away?
Well, I think it's a matter of education. I think to have an observance of a bicentennial, you've got to acquaint the public with what's involved, and I think the public will be very much interested in it. I don't think the public is apathetic about it at all.
One of the projects I know you're interested in are the Indian Mountains in the Vincennes area. Some of us, saturated by the bad publicity the Indians always got in the movies, kind of hate to admit they were here certainly long before we were. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I'll tell you the reason why I have been active in doing something to commemorate the Indian phase of our history is for the simple reason that when George Rogers Clark campaigned, he took Kaskaskia without a battle and was sitting over there on the banks of the Mississippi River when Hamilton moved down here and took possession of the fort and in effect announced that he just wait till good weather, he'd go and wipe Mr. Clark out. And Clark's situation was desperate. He did two things. He sent two men secretly to Vincennes. Father Gibault sent him over to see if the French inhabitants of Vincennes would be friendly to Clark's campaign. He sent Francis Vigo over to see how the Indians around Vincennes would respond. Would they be pro-British or could they possibly support Clark? Those two missions were performed. Gibault administered the oath of allegiance secretly to practically every French inhabitant of Vincennes right under the nose of Mr. Hamilton. Vigo made his contact with the chief of the Pankishaw tribe that lived around here, and he produced 100 men to support Clark's attack. So why shouldn't we give them as much credit as they?
That's true. If it hadn't have been for them, that campaign might have turned out.
Why, especially
had they been on the other side.
If the Indians had gone in and supported Hamilton, or if the French had said we're supporting the British, where would Clark have been? So I think it's just plain justice. And these Indians that lived around this area were not. There's no record of any Indian massacre by the local Indians down here against the white pioneers in this area. They freely intermarried. A lot of them, the old families in Vincennes have Pankishaw blood. And I think they ought to recognize their contribution to the bicentennial, same as anybody else.
Something we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, too, is the fact that almost every community, no matter how small, ought to be able to find something to celebrate, maybe even if it's not of a Revolutionary War era 200 years ago, but there are historical things in every small little hamlet. It's just a matter of finding them.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's true. And I think the bicentennial will promote that.
I think it would be a shame if a community doesn't find anything 200 years old and says, well, we won't celebrate, because there just are not that many settlements that were here 200 years ago.
Most of the United States certainly has no direct connection to the American Revolution, yet we're recipients of it.
The legacy of the Revolution is very much with us.
That's right.
I don't know whether it would be more interesting to live in Massachusetts or Virginia or not. I have a feeling that they're going to be so full of celebrations next year, there may not be room to stand out there.
Well, that's true. But at the same time, we have a lot of history west of that. Take Clark's campaign. What did it do? It moved the first western boundary of the United States from the Allegheny Mountains to the Mississippi River. And it made possible the Louisiana Purchase a few years later that took it to the Rocky Mountains. So we have a part in it.
I was looking at a collection the other day that Dr. Bettman, who was the director of the Bettman Archives, it seems like every history book you look at, many of the pictures are from his collection, released a book recently on the premise that the good old days were not necessarily the good old days.
I don't think so.
Pictures of 9-year-old children working in mills and the
factories. Yeah.
Right, and before the automobile, there was a pollution caused by horses, which was much worse in many cities than the pollution that's caused by automobiles.
Right. Of course, as our population increases and becomes more dense, we have to deal more with pollution than we used to. We were spread pretty thin then, it didn't hurt. But now, as we're jammed up closer as we are, we have to recognize the fact we had to deal with it.
That's the old story of some people wondering how the settlers ever crossed the West before the age of deodorants. In those steamy covered wagons they had. Last week on The Tonight Show, I had the pleasure of watching Red Skelton make one of his rare appearances on television. Red is from Vincennes, and I know you know him. Is he really the kind of wonderful man in person he appears to be on
I think he is a fine character. I think Red Skelton is a man of high ideals. I think he's a good citizen. And just let me remind you, you never saw anything off color on his programs.
No. He made the comment that on that program the other night that people almost don't know how to laugh at a comedian unless he tells dirty jokes.
Well, that's right. He's not of that type at all.
No, are those stories true that he came from a very poor family and used to beg on the streets to do cartwheels or
beg? I don't know the actual beg, but he came on the other side of the track. No doubt about that. Mm-hmm. And I remember we was here one time, and we took him out to his birthplace, and just show you his sense of wit, and then making a point at the same time. Somebody said, "Mr. Sheldon, how long did you live here?" "Oh, I don't know. Not very long. Not very long." "Well, short time?" Well, he said we had to move by every time the rent came due, which was hardly true, I think. But he
was not from the richest family.
No,
in the city. You can say that.
No, he was a good citizen.
It was just, I presume from what I hear, there'll be an effort for him to come back next year, certainly in 1976. Sure. I tried to get in touch with him to talk to him on the phone for this series of programs, and he was didn't even get close to being able to talk to him. The man is just so busy and traveling. It would have surprised me, actually, had I been able to get through to him.
It would have been a surprise because he's under pressure all the time.
Mm-hmm. Would be nice to see him back, though. His kind of comedy.
Well, it's wholesome. There's nothing bad about it. It's
well, there are very few things you can take your children to.
That's right.
You aren't afraid something's going to be said that will embarrass the parents more than the kids.
If Red's ever been guilty of that, I never knew. Did you ever?
No.
I don't think so.
Did it... I guess it was a very happy thing for people in Vincennes to see him in the movies and hear him on radio, to realize that there was a native son who did well. And he never was ashamed from the fact that he was from this area. He mentions it every so often.
Yeah, he's very proud. He comes back every time he gets a chance. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How old would he be now?
Oh, I don't know. Now you ask me.
Late 60s?
Yes, I'd say more apt to be in the 60s, I'd think.
And Florence Henderson, who is from Dale, Indiana, was on the program that night, too. So it was almost an all-Hoosier kind of program.
Yeah, that's right.
We're very much into the time of the county fairs going on now. I can't help but think, for example, in Davies County, our fair is in Elnora, which is a 10 or 15-minute drive. In the days before better highways and automobiles, to get to the county fair, it must have been kind of a trek.
Oh, it was an all-day trip, you know.
Did you stay all night when you were there?
Sure. I was born and raised out here about 14 miles from Vincennes, and it was an all-day trip to get to Vincennes and back. We came about twice, 3 times a year, tax-paying time. Well, they had to come pay taxes. We get up before daylight, start, and we got home after dark. Yeah, long trip.
That seems so...
I've even walked it. I know how far it is.
You've walked?
Yeah, sure. I walked in from home into VU Monday morning. Be there time for a 9 o'clock class.
What time did you have to start?
Well, I started the latter part of the day before.
That says something, considering the easy excuses I've used to get out of coming to class sometimes that don't even begin to hold water.
Yeah,
here you walk all night to get into class.
Yeah, well, I didn't do that all the time. Occasionally, I have done it several times, in fact. But as a country boy, I walked 2 miles to school, to country school. 101 school.
I don't know how a person can even explain to a lot of young people what that was like, because, for example, last week my mother and I went to visit her sister in St. Louis. We got over there in 3.5 hours, 4 hours, and drove back late that evening. It was a pleasant drive. I've been out east several times to Washington, D.C., and driven it in one continuous trip. It's not the most pleasant thing in the world, but I can remember just in the 50s, sometimes we would take 2 to 3 days to drive out there before the interstate highways.
Yeah. And I can well remember before there was the automobile. You went by train. And
I kind of wish they would, if the trains were clean and efficient as they are in Europe and other places, it's too bad they couldn't bring them back. They don't run through the B&O that had so much to do with building this area. The passenger trains don't even run through here anymore. You've got to go to Indianapolis to find a train.
Well, the automobile put them out of business. People preferred the automobile, didn't they?
Right.
Yeah.
It's, well, these ads you see on TV are very much true. People will not ride together unless they have to. Everybody goes out and drives. Was it a simpler life back in those days? What I'm driving at, would you go back now with the conveniences you have now?
Oh, of course not. No.
You'd rather drive than walk.
Sure, I'll admit that.
But it's a pleasant memory.
Yeah, it's a pleasant memory. It didn't hurt me a bit.
No? It's probably partially why you've lived to be 88.
Well, maybe so. I got plenty of exercise.
You certainly did.
Yeah.
As a lawyer and a judge, what kind of thoughts were running through your mind during that unpleasant Watergate mess when all these lawyers were implicated in it? Did that bother you, or did you just see it as an unfortunate situation?
No, I think it's more than unfortunate. I think it's tragic. Of course, I don't like to think of my profession messed up like that. And, of course, it wasn't all lawyers. Some of them were. Most of them, I guess, were. But, no, I just think it's just one of those things that's happened. You can't escape. And we're going to have to live it. I hope we learned a lesson about it. I feel pretty good. Enjoyed talking to you. Come back. Bye-bye.
From the summer of 1975 and the program Older Americans, the Issue is Aging, a rare interview with a rare man, Judge Curtis Shake, who would live about 2.5 years after we did that broadcast. I'm Dennis Daly.